Hello again, college football fans. It's October 12th, Thursday, before week 7 of college football. Going right into this Alabama versus Arkansas preview. Later on, we'll talk about what I want to happen versus what I think will happen. And obviously, I want domination from start to finish, but that's not always what I want as an Alabama fan. But we're not going to talk about that today. Jalen Milroe has never been the liability of this offense, and I keep hearing that. I keep hearing that he was the big liability, and now some people think he could still be, and he might not be. And I've never been all that worried about the quarterback position. I know it's important. I think that the media has always been a little bit too quarterback-centric. Yes, I mean, if you have a star quarterback and he stays healthy all season and he's got good receivers and a good line, you would definitely choose that over not having a star quarterback. But the thing about it is, and Alabama has experienced this pretty starkly over, I would say, over the last, really the entire Nick Saban dynasty that he's on right now. The whole Nick Saban era at Alabama has been sort of a lesson in, it's not always true that you can bank on the team with the star quarterback being, the team that's going to come out as the champion in the end. I mean, all of the early preseason rankings and things like this, I mean, the biggest factor that most people base these things on is if you have a returning veteran star quarterback, you're going to get all the benefits of every doubt, and you're going to be number one or, in the top 5. And obviously, going into this season, the big question for Alabama was the quarterback. I'm just never all that worried when you're in a situation like Alabama's in, where they're going to be one of, if not the most talented roster in college football. I just feel like the quarterback thing always just sort of takes care of itself. Now, people talk so much about how great our quarterbacks have been over the last several years. There's a debate that I have with people about whether Jalen Hurts belongs on that list or not. I leave him off, and if anybody wants to talk to me about that, it's a very interesting subject to me, and I'll be more than happy to do that. But let's go back to Tua. Tua, Mac Jones, and Bryce Young, I think, are the great 3 examples of that. And now let's see. And if you just want to go ahead and throw Jalen Hurts into that, Jalen Hurts started in 2016. So since 2016, Nick Saban, with all these great quarterbacks that have gone on to the NFL, we've won 2 national championships. Now, 2016, prior to 2016, we got 4. And the quarterbacks that we got them with were Greg McElroy, A.J. McCarron. Both of those guys were lifetime backups in their NFL careers. And then Jacob Coker got one as well, who I don't think even was drafted or went to the NFL. I could be mistaken about that, but I don't believe so. And if he did, he certainly didn't have much of a career there. Now, all that being said, everybody knows, if you watch this channel at all, what I think that the big thing that Alabama still needs to improve on more than anything is getting the running game going. Sort of the offensive line altogether, you want to cut down on the mistakes. And yes, I would like for them to cut down on mistakes, obviously. But the main thing that I want them to do is be able to run the ball when we need to or want to, which we're just not there yet against a good team. I mean, I expect to see much better running numbers in this upcoming game, but that might have a little bit to do with the drop-off in competition. I could be wrong about both of those things, actually. What do we have to do to become a good running team? I have boiled this down to the 3 P's, and those P's are power, practice, and personnel. Power and practice are going to work together. That teams that are too quarterback-centric and feel like that the passing game and what the quarterback can do even with his legs, they're just not going to put as much emphasis in practice on a power running game and on run blocking. And I think that we really need to focus on that in practice so that it can translate into games, that we are an offensive line that is able to overpower a defensive front 7 when we need to in a game, whether that's to keep momentum or kill clock or whatever. I mean, there's always going to be reasons you need to run the football. And when you're able to run the football, everything else opens up for you. The passing game obviously opens up. The runs for your quarterback open up, because when they are putting everybody in the box on defense, nothing run-wise is going to open up all that much until you start making holes and making run yards, and then everything starts opening up and everybody's happier. Fans, players, coaches, everybody. That's what we all want. Power practice personnel. So the power will come from the practice. And the personnel, I've said it before, and I know I'm going to be a broken record on this, but, the young guys, we know what we have with Jace McClellan and Roydell Williams. We just know what we have with them, and what we have is not elite running backs. The kind of guys that can make their own holes, even if the offensive line lets them down. And we may not have that on the bench, but that's the only place that we haven't really taken a good look yet. And the tiny little glimpses that we've had of Justice Haynes tells me that is the only place that we have left to look for a running back that can really help everybody out and get this thing going the way it needs to go. Now, that's all I'm going to say about the running game. I think it's pretty well established at this point. And I heard Chris Lowe on ESPN say this the other day, that it really doesn't matter how well Jalen Milroe plays as far as passing the rest of the way out, that if we can't get the running game going, we will lose another game before the end of the season. And we all know what that means, and nobody in Crimson wants to have to deal with that, believe me. Moving on to the defense, going to continue to brag on them because they deserve it. The defensive line, I think, is what the big difference between that Texas game and the way they're playing now, the way they played, in recent weeks. The big difference is the offensive line, not the rushing linebackers that are basically what we used to call defensive ends. I'm talking about those defensive tackles, those guys in the middle. They have really showed up and showed out in the last few weeks, and I think that's why we're getting so much pressure on the quarterback. And that's not the only reason, but I just want to point out that those guys, both of the Tims, Tim Smith, Tim Keenan, Justin Aboigbe, even Jaheim Otis, who I was down on a little bit a couple weeks ago, he has improved and has played a lot better as of late, and it just really shows. And another reason why we've had more quarterback pressure and the defensive line has looked better is because our secondary is playing better than it has in 5 years. And when guys are immediately getting open, when receivers are immediately getting open, then it really doesn't matter how great your defensive pass rush is, because they're not going to have time to get to the quarterback if he sees an open guy in a half a second and gets the ball out. And so, and I also have to brag on the middle linebackers. I mean, the defensive line has been the bright spot through the Pete Golden reign of terror. We always managed to get a guy, it seemed like late in his career and late in his season, who would finally come around and be a really good defensive tackle that could squirt through and pressure a quarterback on his own, and of course stop the run. Some of those names: Phil Mathis, Byram Young, Q Williams was amazing pretty much out of the gate. Christian Barmore was probably the second best out of that group. But this year, the guys that I see that are filling that role are the ones that I already mentioned earlier, especially the two Tims. And they are still my favorite, I think. Although Justin Aboigbe, after the Texas A&M game, is definitely climbing that list as far as my favorite defensive lineman for Alabama. Middle linebackers, I didn't get around to mentioning the names. We know who they are. Deontay Lawson, Trez Marshall, Quindarius Robinson has been great. Kendrick Blackshear has been great. Jahad Campbell. Can't say enough about those guys. And it's so good to see that, because like I mentioned about the defensive line earlier, we just have, those guys have kind of been MIA, those middle linebackers and secondary guys, the last few years. And it's just really great as an Alabama fan to see all that coming together and to see our defense playing at a dominant elite level once again. Going to talk a little bit before I go into what I think is going to happen in this Alabama-Arkansas game. A little bit about the conference. The big games, I think, the only really interesting games are Texas A&M going on the road to Tennessee, and Auburn going on the road to LSU. Now, some people are mentioning Missouri and Kentucky, and I mean, if you're interested in who's going to wind up in the Outback Bowl or the Music City Bowl, then you want to watch that ball game. And even if those bowls have different names nowadays, I couldn't care less. They'll always be the Outback Bowl. The game that's played on January 1st in Tampa is always going to be the Outback Bowl to me, and the one that's played in late December in Nashville is always going to be the Music City Bowl. And I think it actually still is called the Music City Bowl. But anyway, I mean, if you're really interested in who goes to a crappy bowl and a slightly less crappy bowl, then, be my guest. But I'll start off with Auburn LSU. I feel like both of these games are pretty similar, except the roles are flip-flopped from the home team and the away team in each case. In this Auburn LSU game, LSU is coming into this game after having to fight for their life for 3 straight weeks. Arkansas pushed them to the brink. Obviously, Ole Miss beat them, and then Missouri pushed them to the brink. So I'm expecting LSU to be a little bit tired, a little bit of a tired football team coming into this one. Auburn, on the other hand, had an off week, very rested, and I'm very interested in this game because I would like to know who I should be more scared of, or maybe if I should be scared of either one of these parts of these teams that I feel like I should be. On the LSU side, it's Jaden Daniels is what I am afraid of. But I think back to that Florida State game that he played, and they did manage to basically shut him down in the second half of that ball game. And I believe that this Auburn defense that he's about to face is going to be the best defense he's faced since that Florida State defense. So it's going to be interesting to me to see if Auburn is able to slow him down enough to maybe sort of quell my fears about him when they come to Tuscaloosa. And, the thing about it is, though, if Auburn's defense is able to slow him down or, dare I say, shut him down a little bit at times in that game, then I'm going to be nice and scared of that defense and us having to go into Jordan-Hare at the end of the season. So very interesting to me as an Alabama fan to see what's going to happen in that game. I'm not going to really make a prediction, but I do think it should be anybody that's thinking LSU is going to run away with that one, I think you should think again about that. But we'll have to see on that. Now, Texas A&M going into Rocky Top, same scenario, except this time the home team is the team that is rested, and the team coming into it is the team that's gone through a couple of wars in a row. If you want to call the Arkansas-Texas A&M game a war, and then they had Auburn the week before that. So Texas A&M has been on a pretty demanding run here for the last several games they've played. So I expect to see them tired. And of course, Bama, teams that have just lost to Bama the week after have a history of wilting like a dandelion in the sun. So I do think Texas A&M is the better, more talented team in this one, but I wouldn't be surprised at all since Tennessee's got the rest and the home field advantage to see them win. Not going to make any real picks about either one of those games. The big game, I guess, around the country would be Washington versus Oregon. I don't have a whole lot to say about that. Don't watch either one of those teams very much. Bo Nix, I do know that I don't like him very much, and I know that Michael Penix is a very good quarterback out west, so that's all I'm going to say about that one. Now, going into my game pick, I told you I was going to tell you what I hope happens and what I think actually will happen in this game. What I want to happen is I want Alabama to dominate. I want them to have a fast start, which we have not been able to get pretty much all year long, I would say. Offensively, that is. And I would like to see more defensive dominance. The continuation of what we're doing on defense would be just fine with me. And obviously the running game, I want to see it pick up, and I want to see those younger guys get some carries. It's one reason why I would like to see a fast start. Like to see us get out to a big, comfortable lead early. That way we can insert any young guys into the game that we want to and get them some work and see what they look like. Although we're really not gonna know much about the young guys until they have significant playing time in significant parts of the game and not just garbage time. But we'll see what happens. I'd be very surprised if we don't see more of the young guys running in this one. Now, let's see, moving on to Arkansas. Well, the thing that scares me about Arkansas is they're a very wounded team right now. They've lost several games in a row, and this is a proud program, proud coach. They've got a proud veteran quarterback. I don't think that's going to be enough for them, though, to be able to win this ball game. Now, I do believe what is actually going to happen is you're not going to have a fast start from Alabama. It's not going to be a dominant start to finish game for Alabama. I expect Arkansas to make things difficult for us early in this ball game. The real problem from Arkansas right now, they've got a pretty good defensive pass rush. They've got a pretty good defense. They've got some guys that are not going to make the roster for this game, and that's going to hurt them real bad. But the worst part about Arkansas this season has been their offensive line. They can't get anything going because their offensive line looks pretty bad, and that's really bad news against Alabama's front seven. And it's very curious to think about Arkansas having this bad of an offensive line this far into the Sam Pittman era, because that's his specialty, his offensive line. And but that's part of that, Arkansas being a very hard place to recruit and to maintain a high level of recruiting. And I think you're seeing that this year for Arkansas and Sam Pittman. So what I think is going to happen is I think Alabama, because of what I mentioned earlier, actually I didn't mention this, but Alabama's in the same boat as Texas A&M and LSU. They've played 3 tough games. Ole Miss was a very stressful game going into that game because we still really didn't know who we are and what we were going to look like. Mississippi State was the first game on the road, first SEC game on the road, so that carried its own stress factor going into that week. That was a tough week of practice, and they're a tough, strong team too. Even though we beat them pretty easily, doesn't mean that they didn't wear us down a little bit. And then, of course, we were in a very, very tough matchup last week down there in College Station. So I expect Alabama to come out of the gate sluggish. They have all year long, really, especially offensively. Running numbers, I do expect to be much improved. The defense will be great as usual, but I think a shutout's going to be a tall order considering what I've just said about the fatigue that might be setting in and a little bit of sluggish play. I'm thinking that the halftime score is probably going to raise some eyebrows around the country because everyone pretty much is expecting us to hammer Arkansas pretty good. And like I said, I think that the halftime score will tell a little bit of a different story than that. But I do expect us to come out strong in the second half. We've proven to be a second half team pretty much in all our big SEC games anyway that we've played, and I expect to see that continue, and I think that we will manage to make it not that stressful by the end of the fourth quarter. And I think that the final score is going to be 30-10 Alabama. And, let's just hope that we can see some more improvement in that running game because that's the real critical part for Alabama right now. Thanks for watching.